NightMerica is an independently produced podcast. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And please tell your friends about us.
Welcome to NightMerica, a podcast that takes you on a tour of the abnormal, paranormal, weirdly true, and truly weird in every corner across this nation. Because, to paraphrase Ray Parker Jr., whether it's ghosts, aliens, monsters, or monstrous humans, there's something strange in your neighborhoods.
Episode 22, A Night at the Theatre. Alternately, there's no business like ghosts business. Which I also like.
I like ghost business.
I like them both, but I'm Aaron Sagers, co-host of NightMerica, and also from travel channels Paranormal Caught on Camera and ParanormalPopCulture.com. As always, joined by my co-hosts,
Britt.
Hello. Hey,
oh,
Britt.
We said it at the same time. That was so magical. That was like podcast magic.
Actually, I think that's audio hell when it comes to editing, but
I'll deal with that.
Summer continues as we record this. It's August, early August. It's hot outside, which I like the heat. Oh my God.
It's so hot. It's too humid, though. You feel like you're drinking the air.
Yeah. This is, as people know who've listened to this podcast, originally from Florida. The first time when I first moved to New York City, I was in August, I believe August 1st, in fact, and did not think I needed an air conditioner.
Oh.
And I was like, it's hubris for you. Hubris will be your downfall. Where I was like, whatever. I grew up in Florida. I'll be fine without one. But melted.
Yeah.
I then melted into a puddle, an Aaron-sized puddle, and then had to quickly relent and get an air conditioner. And yeah, and if nobody's experienced summer in New York City, it is an entirely different thing.
Oh my God, it's the worst.
It is a harder summer than anywhere that I have experienced before.
Sure.
I'm sure there are hotter places, but it's definitely hotter than Florida, and I think more humid than Florida.
Yes, and the subways in the summer are a nightmare. Like waiting for the subway, it feels like you're walking down the steps to a portal to hell.
That would be appropriate content for this show, but
oh yeah, we should do subways. Duh.
Or portals to hell.
Oh yeah.
It's called I believe the urban island effect. That basically there's just a ecosystem around certain cities that basically turn it into a subtropic climate.
We are subtropic right now. Like that's what they're saying.
Yeah, but without the actual tropic part.
I know. I have a peace lily plant, so it's like kind of tropical.
Well, we can talk what about this is the detour, and it's maybe not cryptozoological in nature, but have you seen very large rats in New York City during
it.
Because there's
I talked about this
pandemic.
on the Hoof. Oh, we talked about this on the Hoof. If anyone listened to it, I was on the Hoof podcast with our friends.
Pandemic plus rats that have been hungry and getting a little bit more bold as they seek out food. There's some big uns out there.
Big uns. Super big uns. In Central Park, I see them all the time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're going to Central Park. I don't really go, since I'm based in Brooklyn, I'm not in Central Park often, but I have seen some massive, massive rats. And I wonder if there will be like an apex predator that emerges, like maybe a massive alligator that emerges from the sewers.
Well, there's, have you heard of a rat king?
Well, the rat king, in my understanding, is when a bunch of rats get tangled up together.
Yes.
And then, yeah. As opposed to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle rat king, which was a villain.
Oh.
But he was, yeah. But, yeah, there's the rat king. But the rat king is not actually kingly, I don't think.
It's just gross.
I've never seen it. Yeah, so, I don't know. Who knows where we might be on our way to some sort of cryptozoological event in New York City based on the heat.
We're going to cover it on NightMerica. which is this podcast. Hi, guys.
that you're
I don't know if we
currently
did that
listening
yet.
to. We did.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, they downloaded the episode. They know that they're listening to a pod.
We
Are
have
there a
a
lot of
lot of new
podcasts out there?
listeners.
Well, okay, out of those new listeners, are there a lot of bait and switch type people that are like, I'm going to start listening to NightMerica? And it's like, ha ha! It is actually a Jane Austen dedicated podcast.
Wouldn't that be great? We can do that for a Patreon episode.
We should. Well, before we get into our topic, let's talk a little bit about the news. And what is your news story for this week? News of the weird.
My weird news this week took place in Delaware. A man took down a would-be robber in a very saucy manner. 2 weeks ago now, an unknown white man came into Stargate Pizza in Greenwood, Delaware, wielding a machete and demanding money. The shop owner stood his ground, said he didn't have any money to give him. And as he had no weapons on the premises, he decided to take on this robber by throwing a pizza in his face. The robber ran away. Like, he was afraid and ran away after getting a pizza. And, like, imagine if it was hot out of the oven, he's going to have burns. So this guy hasn't been caught. But if you're a listener in Delaware, you can contact the Crime Stoppers page if you have a friend that has, like, weird cheese burns on their face all of a sudden.
And if you report this crime in the next 30 minutes, your pizza is free.
Yeah, that would be great.
But, yeah, so...
It's not. We're not sponsored by Stargate Pizza.
No, we're not yet. Stargate Pizza. But wonder what was on the toppings of it.
I hope it was like pepperoni and it was boiling hot and he's got a big circular burn on his cheek.
A pepperoni-sized burn.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be like, yeah, it could be all topping size. That's in comic books. That's really how a supervillain would be born. You know, the old school comic books would be a lot of either radioactive exposure to something or acid. Acid was just used all the time in comic books to create bad guys. So he could be Pizza Face.
He's totally Pizza Face.
And, you know, hot pizza thrown in his face, and then it sends him on a life of crime. Except if he was, like, pineapple topping Pizza Face, no one would take him seriously, and at least 40% of the population would reject him because they don't like... I'm pro-pineapple.
I was just going to say, I thought you were pro-pineapple. I remember that because my dad is pro-pineapple, so you and my dad can get pizza together.
I'm pro pineapples, but I recognize that there are some people who are not. Okay, well I like that story. That is definitely weird.
Yeah,
and
I liked
it. Don't rob pizza places with
just don't rob
machete.
Places.
Yeah.
Especially like
cool,
locally
kids.
owned businesses, that's lame.
I agree. But so my story is last week as we record this, there was another big New York Times article about UFO documents coming out of the government, some that are said to be, that are going to be declassified soon. The big word here is disclosure, and that supposedly we're getting trickles of disclosure. Personally, I don't think we're going to get full disclosure. I don't think we're going to know everything about these government files that the government has. I think there'll be just enough to sort of like, here you go, we gave this to you. I don't think they're going to go full on and say, but they're alien in nature or whatever. But the UFO or unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, still like UFO better.
Yeah.
That was a big story in the New York Times a couple weeks ago. So the result from that, just a lot of news stories coming out. I saw CNN post a story. Well, it was a broadcast, and then they also posted online, starting with the opening statement of, it's time to stop calling people who research and believe UFOs crackpots. And that I thought was a very bold kind of statement. It's not, I mean, obviously it's something that I've believed for a long time, but what I found even more fascinating and to me, it feels like a big news story, is Scientific American on scientificamerican.com posted an article just a couple days ago, headline being unidentified aerial phenomena, better known as UFOs, deserve scientific investigation. UAP are a scientifically interesting problem. Interdisciplinary teams of scientists should study them. It's big because that is a major scientific journal saying that these are worthy of study, worthy of investigation. And I mean that is a big moment.
Yeah.
I think.
For sure.
I don't know if it feels big to you.
This is an exciting time to be alive. Like, we're stuck inside, not much is happening. So, like, at least give us aliens.
At least give us aliens. Or at least, well, I mean, granted, there's a lot of things that these could be. It could be some sort of solar event, some sort of environmental phenomena. It could be man-made. It could be either, if it's top secret, our government's certainly not going to say. It could be created by other governments, a lot of different things. But one of the things that and again, this is, as it goes into what should be the approach to this, Scientific American says interdisciplinary approach, and that it's especially interesting because it's not a U.S. specific event. So we should be gathering scientists around the world to investigate this. And also the other things that was interesting from this is that Scientific American, these scientists there are saying we need to stop looking at this. We need to stop dismissing this as a ridiculous thing. And in fact, a couple quotes that I just think are worthy of mentioning is, quote, "As scientists, we must simply let scientific curiosity be the spearhead of understanding such phenomena. We should be cautious of outright dismissal." I actually think that could be applied to a lot of paranormal phenomena and the study of which. And then it goes on, "Curiosity is the reason we became scientists. In the current interdisciplinary collaborative environment, if someone, especially a fellow scientist, approaches us with an unsolved problem beyond our area of expertise, we usually do our best to actually contact other experts within our professional network to try and get some outside perspective. The best case scenario is that we work on a paper or a proposal with our colleague from another discipline. The worst case is that we learn something new from a colleague in another discipline. Either way, curiosity helps us to learn more and become scientists with broader perspectives." This feels big that Scientific American is saying we need to stop treating this as a exploration, a crackpot exploration.
Yeah.
And there have been other people in the past that have been involved in this, in the study of this. Carl Sagan, even J. Allen Hynek, there's big names. But a lot of that after the 60s really went away. There was some buildup of it. It was being treated perhaps a little more seriously, and then it was kind of retreated. But yeah, I think this is kind of a big piece, and I thought it was worth mentioning. But it's interesting.
It's well written too, because like you said, I think it applies to even more than just like alien or UFO investigations. Like, the piece of the matter is, like, let's work together to like find common, answers. And it's like, my God, if we could all do that in all sorts of mediums, what would this, what could we achieve?
Well, that is how exploration and then in discovery occurs.
Yeah.
So
go scientists.
So yeah. Go scientists.
If you're a scientist,
I always say go scientists.
Yeah, if you're a scientist and you listen to this podcast, thank you.
I think we have at least one geologist that listens to the podcast.
Oh, cool.
So she's great. Okay, well, let's get into the topic. Of course, we're going to be talking about theaters, and as teased in the headline. And before we get into that, I am curious, did you ever have like a haunted theater growing up? I know there are, not only in Chicago, but Paris has some really notoriously haunted theaters.
Yeah. I actually myself never went to the theater in Paris, but we would go in London a lot. But of course, I was so little, like I didn't really know. Chicago, of course, has one, and that's what I'm doing my story on today. But I mean, I just love the theater scene. Like, they have so many great superstitions and, so much history involved that I think it lends itself to a lot of these really interesting stories. And you were a theater kid, so you really know it.
I was, yeah. I was always like sort of journalist, writer, and theater kid. But theaters certainly lend themselves to phenomena, according to theory. It's a gathering of people, a lot of energy, a lot of emotion, and then also a lot of times there's these renovations that take place over the years. Although, just going the Paris Opera House and notorious for Phantom of the Opera. I was surprised disappointed that you did not see a show there. But that's one of the famous ones. But mine, I was thinking about this. There's the Fox Theater, fabulous Fox Theater in Atlanta, which is one of my favorite theaters. But I was thinking about theater experiences, and in the paranormal world, I have had a few. But when I was younger in college, I was living in Georgia for the first part of my college career. And there was a theater that I had actually performed in many times. And for whatever reason, this wasn't like an old majestic theater. It wasn't particularly fancy. It was just a theater. And for whatever reason, one time I had to go there. I think I had keys and had to go there to pick something up from the lighting booth. And maybe it's the wide open spaces. Maybe it's how dark it gets, except for the ghost light. Of course, there's the ghost light that's always on. But I went in, and yeah, it was creepy. But then I walk upstairs and I go into the sound booth to try to get whatever, like I was retrieving something. And I distinctly remember this sense of not being alone. And that's a very, it could just be your own mind working against you. I'm not saying it was a ghost, but I will say that I just felt like not alone there. And in that experience in Tifton, Georgia at the theater, I was just like, I got to get out of here. And I did very quickly. Yeah. So that was and that was not like a majestic theater, but I think we're going to be talking about some cool majestic theaters. So before we get into it, let's hear a word from one of our sponsors. Is Brooklyn one of the most haunted places in America? It's a worthwhile question. And this podcast happens to be brought to you in part by Brooklyn's one and only mobile ghost tour, Madame Morbid Trolley Tours, which is the official haunted tour of NightMerica. So we've talked about this before. Madame Morbid, it's a Victorian era funeral inspired trolley, which just sounds like a great way to cruise around town, don't you think?
The only way I want to cruise around town.
The only way. See, you're making a bold claim. You're just planting a flag in only if it's not. If it's not Victorian era funeral inspired trolley, it's
why bother?
It's crap, according to Brit. Well, then that's why you should go on a Madame Morbid trolley tour. First chance you get, because it is the only way to cruise around Brooklyn and learn about Brooklyn's haunted history and true crime. So they are currently off the road. They are social distancing. They're chasing ghosts, but they also have gift cards available for when they reopen, which hopefully is soon. As we're recording this, hopefully we're getting close to them being able to reopen. So be sure to check out madamemorbid.com or give them a follow at Madame Morbid NYC to support your local ghost tour and our official haunted tour. And by the way, their answer is yes. Brooklyn is haunted. Okay, well, let's dive into the theater. Let's check in. Let's tear our tickets.
Let's tear our tickets.
and
Let's go to
take a
coat
seat.
check.
And have the usher walk us
Yeah.
to
Get our
the seat.
playbill.
Maybe get some snacks.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't know.
Have a glass
Stop
of wine.
also stop at the bathroom because there's nothing more
Lord.
annoying than getting up in the middle of the
It's the
show
worst.
to go pee. So, especially if you're sitting in the middle of the row. So, why don't you kick things off? I speak from experience. Why don't you kick things off? And what's your tale?
Well, I'm excited to tell my tale because it's a story on my hometown that I had never heard of until my dear co-host, Aaron Sagers, friend of all, told me about it. Apparently, I lived in the Midwest without ever knowing anything about the Midwest. So here we go. We are doing this story on the Iroquois Theatre that used to be located where the Nederlander Theater is now, or also called the Oriental Theater. It's in Chicago's downtown loop. When it first opened, critics were in love with it instantly. It opened November 23rd, 1903. And an article from the New York Clipper said, "Few theaters in America can rival its architectural perfections." So, there's that. How did it get these architectural perfections? A little flexibility with the fire code. The Great Chicago Fire had been only 32 years prior. So feels like a bold move to kind of be like whatever to fire code, but well, we're going to learn about that. So the theater sat 1,600 people, and it had only one entrance, one door. Why? Because they wanted this to be a theater where people were see and be seen. So one entrance connected to a stair that connected to the balcony. So everyone could see your outfit as you walked in to the theater. These were the original Instagram influencers that were risking their lives to show off their look.
And it doesn't, obviously we know the story's going to take a horrible turn, but okay, so far it's okay, yeah, sure, it's playing up the hype of the glamour of the theater. So, so I can get that so far, even though, but wait, there's more.
But also theaters take forever to leave after a show now. Could you imagine being in the nosebleed seats when the curtain goes up and leaving? You would be there forever.
Yeah, good point.
Before they officially opened, a fire captain came and did an unofficial tour of the building to make sure it was up to code. I guess they just wanted to stick to true Chicago fashion, because in his report, this guy reported that there were no sprinklers, no fire alarms, no phones, or a water source to set out a fire. Instead, they had giant tubs of sodium bicarbonate, which is a powder that you can, quote, forcibly hurl at a fire if it happened. I'm guessing this is basically what is inside of now our fire extinguishers, but because there wasn't this actual fire extinguisher, they just had this powder in buckets around the theater that you could just throw at a fire. He reported this, and the powers that be looked the other way because the theater gave them free tickets. So, heyo, Chicago. Despite all of this, the Iroquois Theater opened right before Thanksgiving and advertised itself as absolutely fireproof. Literally, that was how it advertised itself. It was come see a show at the Iroquois Theater. We're absolutely fireproof. That's such a weird way to advertise yourself. I guess the Chicago fire hadn't happened all that long ago, but what? It just feels
Well,
so
yeah.
weird.
I'm sure people were a little bit gun shy. Maybe not 30 years later, but yeah, it makes sense. But again, it's hubris. It's like
Yep.
you're setting yourself up.
Well, didn't they
Um,
say the Titanic was an unsinkable ship?
yeah, and that was in 1912. So you would
Yeah.
have thought maybe they didn't learn the lesson from the Iroquois.
Yep.
But continue.
So a month after they opened, December 30th, the cast is performing Mr. Bluebeard, which is like a parody of the French story of Bluebeard. And it was so popular that not only did they sell the 1,600 seats, they also sold an extra 400 tickets of standing room only for people to stand at like the back of the theater and in the halls. At the end of the first act, a spark from an arc light lit a curtain on fire on the stage, and it instantly spread. So one of the stagehands grabbed the bucket of sodium bicarbonate to hurl at the fire, but he was on the ground, and this fire was up by the lights, and so he forcibly hurled it into the air, but the fire was at the top of a 3-story building, so it just went. It's like when you watch those corgis like take a big ramp to jump into a lake, and they just like make no air and just belly flop. That's exactly how I picture this to go down. So Eddie Foy at the time was like a very famous vaudeville star, and he was performing that night. And this hero ran on stage to try to keep the attendees calm despite the fire burning the theater down around him. His son was in the audience that night. I just got goosebumps. His son was in the audience that night, and as he passed his little boy off to a stagehand to get him out, he looked to the audience and was devastated to know how many mothers and children were in the audience because it was like a comedy show. So
I knew it was a matinee, right?
Yes, it was a matinee. It was like at 3 p.m.
So younger audiences typically in a matinee.
Yep. But despite his like best efforts to keep people calm and keep things, as best as he could, people panicked, and they were all trying to cram out of the one front exit of the theater. What's super interesting is that there were 2 baseball players there at the time, one for the Chicago Colts and one for the Boston Beaneaters. Why they're not still called the Beaneaters is sad. I could be a Boston Beaneater. I freaking love beans. They were in the audience, and they started like moving things, and they found 2 fire doors on the side of the theater that had been hidden by curtains, and they both were able to unlock them and get people out. The ushers had not been trained on how to unlock them, so it's interesting that the attendees were able to be the ones to save people. Those who were able to get out this way walked out onto unfinished fire escapes, and they had to jump to their deaths from the multiple stories of this theater. What's really devastating is that the ones who jumped first didn't survive the fall, but they ended up breaking the falls of those who jumped after them, so some people were able to survive that way.
Which is just so, like, I mean, that alone
makes you ill.
So, traumatic that they survived because they were landing on
bodies.
Corpses.
Yeah. Northwestern University had a building just right next door. And these students at this building actually shimmied a ladder from their building to that like top floor of the theater, and people were able to climb across that to safety. Dancers and actors backstage were trying to escape as like the smoke is building and building, but the back exit for the theater opened inward to bring sets in, and it got jammed as people were like pushing their bodies against it. Performers ended up having to escape from dressing room windows or the coal hatch, which is like basically a doggy door kind of thing on buildings that they could shimmy coal through for fires, or like my house growing up, it was like a milk hatch where a milk delivery driver would put the milk and it would open on the inside. So they would have to shimmy through these tiny things. Someone was able to open the freight doors backstage that like the giant scenery was brought through. But that rushed a bunch of cold air into the stage, and it created a fireball that like pushed through the stage over the orchestra and like burned everything and everyone stuck on the second level. And like, as I talked about before, the Titanic and like a kind of Titanic level of classism, the theater brings down iron gates between performances to prevent people from cheap seats moving down to better seats mid-show, which also my dad and I would totally do at Blackhawk games. But they would bring down iron gates to prevent that from happening, and these gates were never lifted. So these people in like the cheapest seats were trapped in this area. So they were stuck when the fireball went through. If they did survive, they had to like climb over the overhangs, or they were literally crushed to death, similar to the Heysel Stadium disaster that I covered, of pressing against these gates or trying to get these gates, and they were just asphyxiated with bodies. It took about 15 minutes for the fire department to get there, and after police called from a police office box like down the street is how they were notified. But in 15 minutes, so much destruction happened. 575 people in the theater died that day, including 300 from the cast and crew. To put it in perspective, 300 people total were killed during like the Great Chicago Fire. So this is so many people. And pretty much everyone else had injuries or damage to their lungs due to being in the smoke. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy, but some good did come of it. After this, standing room tickets were never allowed to be sold again, just due to capacity codes. Chicago theaters were shut down for 6 weeks by Mayor Carter Harrison Jr. He also faced charges that were, of course, later dismissed because we're telling the story about Chicago. But he ignored warnings blatantly. Theaters across the world had to shut down until they were able to fix doors to open outside and be clearly marked. And they, of course, had to have more than one entrance and exit at the front. And this is also where panic bars was built. So we see on doors now those like large bars that you can push to open larger doors. This is what created them. Like all the people panicking, smushing against doors, trying to get them to open. That is how we have that in place. And then theater-wise, they now require all stages to have a fire curtain that comes down to separate the stage from the audience in case of a fire. So at least like one end is protected and people can get to safety. There's a lot of interesting articles, just to cite my sources. I'm going to post them on our show notes, but of course, Chicago Tribune has a ton of them. And then there's a really good website called Chicago and Cook County Cemeteries that has an article called Absolutely Fireproof, which is where I got most of my information from. But that's the terrible Iroquois Theatre Fire.
Yeah, and I want to since I like this location is so notable. First off, I just want to give a shout out to Ursula Bielski of Chicago Hauntings as well, because I've known about this story for a while, but she does a good haunted tour of the area, and I believe she goes to the Iroquois. A couple of the things that I just find so interesting from a paranormal perspective with this story is that you have this sudden violent death, so obviously a lot of emotion in a place because of that, and then it's largely unresolved. Like there wasn't anyone charged or no one was held accountable for the cutting of the corners and everything. There were some grave robbers, I guess, that were body thieves that were charged, because the first people that were in the building when it reopened were not really firefighters, but people that were yanking off jewelry and necklaces and things. Even some reports of people cutting off women's fingers
my God,
to get rings off, because that was faster. But the ghost stories surrounding it, the theater itself no longer stands.
Correct.
If I'm remembering correctly.
It demolished, but now there is the Nederlander Theater that's on the same block, but it is not the same building.
Yeah. And the Oriental, is it the Nederlander or the Oriental?
It's the same. There? They're interchangeable.
Okay. Anyhow, the alley outside of that,
yes,
the newspaper called it the alley of death and mutilation.
Yes. I have walked down that alley so many times because it cuts across from one block to another. So the college I went to, they had a college campus like right there. And I would walk down that all the time. I never experienced anything.
Yeah. So as a ghost story, yeah, it's notoriously, supposedly haunted. And I think this also speaks to the reason that we tell ghost stories, is to keep that history alive of these people that, they were just going out for a day at a show.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't deserve to die like that because of a lot of cost cutting measures. Interestingly enough, that Bluebeard show, or Mr. Bluebeard,
mm-hmm.
Do you know what it's about?
It's a guy who was a serial killer for his wives, isn't it?
Yeah, he murdered like 7 wives, and he's about to murder his 8th wife. But the thing that I love about it, it's based on a French folk tale, but it's hilarious to me is that it's considered a children's Christmas show.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. But then the rhyme 3 blind mice?
Mm-hmm.
That's like 3 blind mice, see how they run. They all went after the farmer's wife who chopped off their tails with a carving knife. Like, we sing that to my 2-year-old niece. That's so creepy.
But, there's a lot of dark stuff that comes out of children's stories.
Yeah, like the poppies. What's that poppy one? That's like about the bombings of World War II. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah. But anyhow, that's I hate to say I don't love that story, but it is a certainly fascinating paranormal story.
I'm so glad you told me. My family in Chicago had not heard of it either. And we're like big theater people, so they're very excited for this episode.
Yeah. And actually, we're just around the corner from the centennial of that. It's only a couple years away from the 100-year anniversary of that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what kind of activity takes place on the actual anniversary.
Let's go.
I would happily go.
Okay.
But before we dive into my story, let's hear from another sponsor. Think things are bad now? Well, it could be worse. Don't believe me? Just read Dead Run, the new sci-fi thriller from author Mike Maddox. A mysterious force is taking control of people's bodies and making them run to stay alive. And if you can't keep running, now this is the ad copy, so I'm reading the ad copy because it says, if you can't keep running, you blow up like spaghetti left in the microwave too long. It's not a good scene. It's a very messy situation.
And it's got to have marinara sauce because then it kind of looks like blood.
Right. And the pasta itself would be sort of look like viscera.
Ew.
And except in a microwave, but at least in a microwave, you're contained. The explosion is contained.
Yeah.
It's a messy microwave to clean up. But if you're running down the road and you can't run anymore, just splat. And then you're all over your friends and the other apocalyptic pals.
Ew, do not
nearby.
splat on me.
And in an apocalypse, you don't have easy access to soap, water. I don't even know if you can stop running long enough to like shampoo and bathe after your friend, your pal is just blown up on you. Anyhow, I mean, this is really, I think, selling the book. Anyhow, the story follows a group of weary travelers as they make their way through a hellish landscape where there's only one rule: run or die. This is Dead Run, and other than being chilling and scary, it will also perhaps inspire you to eat the right kind of carbs and jog every day just in case this apocalypse hits. So check it out. It's available exclusively on Amazon Kindle. It's only like $3. It's well worth your $3. And read Dead Run by Mike Maddox on Amazon Kindle. So my story is, it's worth noting there's so many haunted theaters around the world and around the country, and I couldn't quite decide which one to go with because I know of quite a few of them. There is one that is in Cleveland, I believe, that's connected to Lemmy from Motorhead. Not that his ghost haunts the place, but it's, he plays a significant part of the lore of that theater. But weirdly enough, that's not what I'm going to go with because I felt like you had the Midwest covered, so I should clear out of there. There's a lot in LA. There's some in Utah. But instead of the Variety Theater in Cleveland, instead of the Palace Theater or the Grauman's Theater in LA, I decided to bring it back home to New York City. And just before I get into it, I want to read this quote from Playbill. Playbill said, quote, "Each night after the applause dies, the curtain falls, the audience vanishes, the cleaners dust, and the lights are killed. Great theaters become dark and silent places, but not always quite empty." And I think that's a cool quote, just speaking to the haunted reputations of theaters. So instead of the Palace Theater in Los Angeles, instead we're going to talk about the Palace Theater in New York City. It's located at Broadway and West 47th Street. Opened on March 24th, 1913. And it was built by promoter Mark Beck. And he called this theater the Valhalla of Vaudeville. And indeed, it was a showcase to vaudeville performers. Now, I want to quote from Curbed a little bit here, and they note that this was built by the Milwaukee-based architecture firm of Kirchhoff and Rose, and it says that they were somewhat limited in their design potential because, and this is interesting, the theater was actually located in a 10-story office building and surrounded by existing buildings. So that's, even in 1913, that's crowded New York City. So they designed this 3-level auditorium with 16 parquet-style boxes arranged along the walls. And there was also this big arch that had this sort of stylized sunburst on either side of the arch. So that it was a neoclassical style. And I think that's always interesting to find out about the architecture of the building. But from the time that it opened, 1913, and really from 1915 to 1930, this was just populated with so many top performers. Irving Berlin, Helen Keller, Harry Houdini performed there. Big
Helen
fan of
Keller?
Harry Houdini. Helen Keller,
What
yeah.
did she do?
I don't know what her performance was, but I'm sure it was probably not a performance, probably a talk.
Oh.
Jack
She had
Benny,
dachshunds. Did you know that?
I did not, but I wonder if she brought her dachshunds to the Palace Theater. You could do that when you're a big time star. You can just bring your animals places. That's what I'm looking forward to. Mark Hamill from Star Wars, he travels with his dog. Carrie Fisher used to travel with her dog. That's really what I want to do. But not to the Palace Theater, because that was in 1930, and the Marx Brothers were there, Bing Crosby, Fred Astaire. All these guys and women performed there, Bob Hope. And this expression to play the palace was this expression of success. That's how you knew that you made it. And interestingly, it was such a location that people would perform outside the theater. There was an area called the beach outside of the palace. And jugglers, comedians, dancers, dog acts even, I don't know if they were dachshund dog acts, would perform on the sidewalk in front of the palace known as the beach, trying to get the eye of the bookers. So that didn't last too long, though, because what happened was, well, I said it was pretty popular until 1930. Well, the Great Depression. Around the time of the Great Depression, public was not so fascinated in vaudeville, and certainly the theater itself was not as popular. And entertainment really became the entertainment media of choice was radio and film. And the theater became the RKO Palace, a cinema, in 1932. It would still have some reviews over the following decades, and they even tried to bring vaudeville back to the stage at one point. Frank Sinatra was there. Danny Kaye. I don't know if you're familiar with Danny Kaye. You probably are.
Nope.
Okay. White Christmas. No.
Yeah.
Harry Belafonte. And Judy Garland, it's important to note, Judy Garland, her final New York performances happened in the theater in 1967. So in the 60s, the theater was renovated, and then it reopened as a regular theater in 1966, and it was back to hosting musicals at that point. Now, it's hard to ever quantify this. People say more than 100 ghosts haunt the Palace Theater. Okay, that's
Is it like a
questionable
census?
claim. Yeah,
fill out a
that's
census
always
form?
my thing. It's like ghosts are terrible about filling out surveys and census, but we easily say places are the most haunted city, the most haunted theater. But okay, whatever. I would say that it's considered to be the most haunted theater in New York City, at least. Let's get into the ghosts of the palace. There's a couple, at least, said to haunt the orchestra pit itself. Perhaps the most famous is this white-gowned cellist. And I love the idea of a ghostly cellist, but a white-gowned cellist who still performs. And actress Andrea McArdle was in Beauty and the Beast in 1999, and I don't have a direct quote from her, but it is part of the industry lore that she spotted this cellist while she was performing. She spotted this cellist in the orchestra pit, the ghostly cellist, probably also a real cellist, but the ghostly cellist is more interesting. Another phenomena is from a seating area for the band, and there's supposedly a phantom pianist. And supposedly the piano starts to play, and you can see the keys dancing up and down, but you don't see anyone on the bench, which is just classic, great, spooky, ghosty type of stuff. There are also a pair of kid ghosts that are in the theater, and one is said to be a little girl, sometimes reported as sad looking, but a little girl who's sort of a peekaboo ghost who looks down from the balcony. There's also supposedly a little boy who rolls toy trucks on the landing behind the mezzanine. I do want to say, as far as child ghosts, sometimes we go to this idea of maybe they died there, or isn't that sad? I don't know. Could be that they had such a great time there that they left some sort of emotional footprint in a location. It's not always tragedy associated with hauntings. There's also this man in a brown suit who is said to be seen at the palace. He apparently walks quickly past the office doors, and some people believe that he's a ghost of a manager who is counting up the house. So some people say it was even Mark Beck himself who was who built the theater and was the original promoter. Who knows?
Interesting. If I become a ghost, I sure as hell better not be haunting retail stores as a manager. Like, put me somewhere cool. I am not sending people on their lunch breaks after death.
Well, it depends on how much say you have in the matter, but if it's residual,
That's what I'm going to
then
be
you're
doing.
well, no, well, yeah, but it's not you. It's just it's not a that's not an intelligent haunt. If it's you and it's residual, then it's a moment in time playing on a loop. So it's not your awareness or consciousness that's involved in it, in theory.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Just
Yeah.
like an imprint.
Yeah.
If it's intelligent and if you're there, well, that sucks.
It does.
Maybe that would be like your hell. Maybe that means that you've pissed off some deity and now your eternity is to work in retail after death.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of depressing.
I know, this is.
But I think
let's move on. This is making me feel emotional.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think anyone really wants to work at their job all their life after
Exactly.
go. But I'm going. You can hitch a ride with me to Tahiti. I think that's where I'm
Awesome.
going to be spending my afterlife.
Come with us, NightMericans.
Whoa! There's only enough room in the car and the ghost mobile for I don't know, but I mean, I guess
We can borrow the
I'm gonna have
Scooby-Doo
my.
van.
How many people do you think fit the Scooby-Doo van?
I don't know, there's like 6 of them. And Scooby. Or the dog. Is the dog named Scooby?
There's not 6 people in Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, huh? There's the preppy boy.
Name them.
The preppy
Wait,
boy.
no, names.
I don't know their names. I'm a 30-year-old woman. There's preppy boy.
Scooby-Doo transcends
There's the
age.
weed boy. There's the nerdy girl. There's the pretty girl. The dog. I don't know. I got 5.
Well, okay, I guess the dog is the main character, but I wouldn't count him as far as the people that are sitting in the car.
I don't know. If I don't want extra people squished in your car if your dogs are in there, you know?
It's Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby. Now,
There we go.
if they were on an adventure with Scrappy-Doo,
Who's Scrappy?
I don't know. There's probably Scrappy-Doo defenders out there, but Scrappy-Doo is pretty roundly, universally considered just the worst. It's just
Why?
because he's the young character they introduce to liven things up, but he's a freaking know-it-all dog, and he's just obnoxious. In fact, there's a vast Scooby-Doo family. There's a big Doo family. So, you know.
Oh, Scrappy-Doo is cute.
Scrappy-Doo was an obnoxious turd, and no one likes him. He is the Cousin Oliver of the Mystery Gang.
Who's Cousin Oliver?
Cousin Oliver, this is taking such a detour. Cousin Oliver was the character added to the Brady Bunch, also intended to be like the younger, cuter, precocious child character to liven things up. This typically happens when a show goes a couple seasons, and the kids on the show are getting older, and they introduce a younger character to liven things up. Every major sitcom, I think, has done that, including Growing Pains, which had a younger character, but then they needed another younger character later on, and that other younger character was played by a young Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, dang.
So yes, the Cousin Oliver effect or the Scrappy-Doo effect is, but anyhow, Scrappy-Doo, yeah, I guess if you count Scrappy-Doo, there's 6 people in the Mystery Machine, but I think you could fit more. You could probably put another bench in that van. I don't know if that van would make it to Tahiti to hang out on a ghostly beach with me, but we'll sort out the logistics in the afterlife where we have plenty of time to do this. Anyhow,
the manager.
So the Palace Theater. Yeah. The manager of the Palace Theater supposedly haunts the location as well. There's also, I think this is kind of cool because this was a weirdly good cliffhanger for the next one because, well, there is another ghost by the name of George. People call him that. I don't know that he's introduced himself as George. Supposedly a former manager. And this is sad. He hung himself.
Oh.
And when you pass the spot where it happened, you can supposedly smell the burning cigarettes that he used to chain smoke. But the most famous spook of the Palace Theater, someone that was performing her final New York City performances there, was Judy Garland. Judy Garland is said to haunt a door that was actually built specifically for her at the rear of the orchestra. And this was used for her own entrances, private entrances on and off stage, entrances and exits. And some reports say that you can see Judy Garland poking out the door before vanishing. Apparently still keeping an eye on the crowd, see who's out there to watch her. And during a 2011 showing of Annie, the revival of Annie, Playbill reported that actor Ryan Vandenboom claimed that when alone in a dressing room one night, he thought he heard a voice call, Judy. Or maybe it was Judy. I don't know. I'm going with Judy.
Yeah.
Because as a ghost, that's how I will communicate everything. Now, but that's interesting. It's worth noting also that that's always good for press when you can drum up a good ghost story in a haunted theater and you're in a show. But the one ghost, another ghost that, and this is sort of, Judy is the most famous one, but this one is the ghost that you don't want to encounter because, so he's the ghost of a vaudeville acrobat. And according to the lore of the palace legend, during a performance, he fell and broke his neck. His name is Louis Borsellino, and he was known as the Palace Ghost. Apparently in the 1950s, this as a high wire act, he was performing without a net, fell to his death on the stage floor. Pretty terrible.
Yeah, that's bad.
And when the theater is empty, Borsellino's apparition can be seen swinging from the rafters. Now, if you see him and he lets out a scream, blood-curdling in nature, as he reenacts his nosedive to his demise, it's not so good for you. Because if that happens, you are rumored to die shortly thereafter.
Oh,
He's a
my
harbinger ghost. Although, he probably also didn't die, because the New York Times reported in 1935 that yes, he did fall, and he fell 18 feet, which is a big fall. But in front of a crowd of 800 people, too.
Oh my God.
But he was only injured.
Oh.
So, but, you know, who knows? Maybe he could still, that tragic moment could still haunt the theater. Anyhow, the ghosts of the Palace Theater are so well renowned that I just found this pretty humorous. So the theater was undergoing renovations before the pandemic. It was supposed to reopen in 2021. I don't know what that timeline looks like now, but they're so well renowned that there's a satirical website called Broadway Beat that kind of poked fun at it a little bit, because there was the show SpongeBob SquarePants that played at the Palace Theater. And Broadway Beat even said, Palace Theater construction workers haunted by the ghost of SpongeBob SquarePants. And it's a pretty funny article about them encountering this pale ghost, or a pale yellow ghost that they've encountered in the theater. But
that's cute.
So, and I also, in addition to Playbill and Curbs, I also want to give a nod to hauntsandhistory.blogspot.com. They had some nice research on their site as well. So that is the Palace Theater, both a place for plays as well as movies at different times in their career. But there are so many great haunted theater stories out there.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
So, yeah, makes me want to I think I've been there before, but makes me want to take another trip to the Broadway. People's moments of great triumph and tragedy take place there too. The moments where they become a star or where they feel like they've flopped and then disappear. So many dreams and wants and desires are playing out on that stage. So, well, with that said, let's wrap up with some paranormal pop culture recommendations. What are you into this week?
This week I finally watched the movie. Those of you who listen know that I've not seen any movie ever. But I watched the 2006 movie Nice Guys, where Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe play kind of crummy PIs that are trying to figure out the death of this porn star and if it was a ghost that, her grandma saw and what happened. And it was just really funny. I watched, I'll Be Gone in the Dark ended this week and it's very sad and heavy. And so it's a nice, light, pulp, true crimey pop culture situation. So I highly recommend it. It's funny.
Very cool.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, it is. It is a good movie. Yeah, I do like that movie. I should go back and revisit it. It's only a couple years old, but I feel like so much has happened between now and then. I forget about it. I'm into quar horror.
What?
Which is it's a subgenre of horror. I'll say it again. Quar horror. Quarantine horror.
Oh.
And so this has been something that's been popping up, obviously. People are still going to be interesting creatives and put stuff out there. And there's been some good sort of pandemic-inspired horror movies on YouTube. But the one that I'm specifically going to recommend is called Host. And it just debuted, as we record this, only debuted last week on the horror streaming service Shudder.
Mm-hmm.
It was filmed over 12 weeks in quarantine entirely on Zoom. And it is the setup is that it's these young girls that are holding a virtual seance over Zoom during lockdown, which is really something that, you would do.
Totally, I will do it.
It's a slumber party kind of thing. I mean, I've had tarot readings on Zoom.
Yeah.
I've done the Ouija board experiments on Zoom. So
can we do that for a mini-sode?
A Ouija board experiment on
Zoom?
Zoom?
Or just any kind of cool thing like this. Let's do it.
I'm sure we can. Just have to plan it. But what's cool about this is that it utilizes a lot of the elements of Zoom that typically would be annoying, but instead are turned into spooky effects, such as when your voice becomes garbled, that audio kind of clicks out or whatever, or when you drop off, or even they even do some interesting things with sort of the fake backgrounds. You don't actually know where people are when those fake backgrounds are up because they're almost a little too good, and even filters. They play with filters as well. This is directed by Rob Savage, and it's very timely. But the thing I will add to this is that I'm not easily creeped out. This can be a quite creepy movie.
Oh, I can't wait to watch it.
I obviously talk a lot about creepy stuff, and I think that they really did a great job with this, and it's a Zoom feature movie. So check out Host.
I've been debating getting Shudder, but now I feel like I should.
I feel like you should.
And if Shudder wants to sponsor us, that'd be cool.
Shudder, sponsor us. Let's talk right to Shudder. Shudder, if you're listening, we want you.
Yeah.
Let's make it work.
Anyone. If anyone wants to sponsor us, that'd be cool.
Yeah, not to seem so desperate or anything, Britt, but really, literally anyone. We've already asked you to download the podcast and listen. We also have a Patreon page that you can support. But if you want to take that next step in supporting our podcasts, we need a sponsor. Please be a sponsor. Well, you want us to come over and clean your apartment? We'll do it. Just sponsor us.
Aaron will do it. Aaron will do it without a shirt on, ladies.
Nobody wants that.
I think a lot of women would want that, Aaron. You've got quite the following.
Well, what's nice is that it's during summertime. I have gotten a little bit of color. So if you sponsor us and you want me to come clean your house with my shirt off, God help you. First off, this pandemic has been very hard on you if that is the case. But if you want it, if you are that level of masochist that you just need that in your life, rather than the pasty white glow of my skin for the previous months of pandemic, you will get a slightly less pasty white glow due to exposure to sun. But really, I mean, my sense of ethics at this moment, we want sponsors, but I don't even feel like I can do that to you. But let us know. We have an email address.
This is my favorite ending to an episode yet. Thanks, guys.
If you like NightMerica, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us a follow on social media and share this with your friends.
And if you'd like to share your paranormal stories or even seek paranormal advice, which is for entertainment purposes only, email nightmericashow@gmail.com.